So let's look at a typical policy and how it's built. So we're going to look at the composition of the different forms. What sort of forms should you be looking for and asking for from a business owner who may have a business interruption policy? And what are the different areas that we are going to reference in terms of a BI measurement? So first, we're going to look at the declarations page. A lot of people just shorten it to the dec page. Essentially, a cover sheet which more or less lists the insurance limits and other terms of a typical BI policy. We're going to look at the policy itself, which in many cases would be a ISO form, which is the Insurance Services Office. And typically, we're looking for a CP 0030, which is the business income and extra expense coverage forms. So we're going to look at an example of that. There are other forms out here that may not necessarily have extra expense coverage, and there's different variations, but this is one that's very common in the marketplace. And then we're going to take a look at a cause of loss form, which could be a good starting point for you to understand whether a business owner has coverage available for a given event.
All right, so let's talk real briefly about some of the different coverage forms that may be applicable to a business interruption policy. Obviously, you're going to have the BI and extra expense coverage form, that CP 0030 that we were talking about. But in addition, you may be referring back to some of the other ancillary forms, and in this case, what we're looking at is the declarations page. What the declarations page lists out are the coverages that are available, the applicable limits, and the physical locations they may be tied to. So in this case, when we're looking at the business income, it'll list out the limit of insurance and may also list out some of the other ancillary coverages that are available. We may have coinsurance, we may have monthly limits, we may have a few other different issues to deal with in order to measure the business interruption loss. So that would actually list out if there's a business interruption policy, but they would be attached to a physical location. So in the case where you actually have multiple locations, you may have location 1, building 1, and a building associated with it. You may have location 2, building 1, location 2, building 2, if there's multiple locations multiple buildings at the same location.
Now, before we get into the BI policy itself, let's take a quick look at a cause of loss form. This is a sample we just Googled, but it's important because we're going to be referring back to this once we get into the BI policy. Now, it's just important to note that this may actually be modified by the dec page because this is a standard form. So you're looking at the covered causes of loss, and it generally says as long as it's not excluded or limited, then there should be some sort of coverage. But this is where you're referring back to that dec page to just make sure that that these terms have not been modified. In the case of Hurricane Harvey, where you're dealing with a lot of flood, this is one that may actually, you may see that some of those may, one of the exclusions generally is flood water. And so, you're looking at the specific terms, and flood specifically may be excluded as part of a typical policy. There may be coverage afforded elsewhere. Hopefully, your client would have some sort of flood policy through FEMA. But that's one of those considerations that you're looking for and trying to determine how you can best help the business owner.